think about this for a second. Why does it sometimes feel like we know more about like the surface of the moon than the bottom of our own ocean?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's kind of wild to think about. We live on this planet that's mostly water, right? But the deep ocean is still this massive, untamed frontier.
Yeah.
We're constantly finding things down there that just completely defy what we thought we knew about biology.
Welcome to the deep dive, everyone. Today, we are taking you straight into that frontier. And we have a really specific mission for this dive. We're taking this huge stack of recent underwater wildlife news, and we're just going to break it all down so it's incredibly easy to understand.
Exactly.
So whether you're, a marine biologist, or maybe you're just someone who loves throwing on an ocean documentary to relax, this is for you.
And we've got some amazing source material guiding us today. We're looking at fresh scientific studies, a really comprehensive wildlife report called a Bycatch 22.
Yeah, that one is intense.
It really is. Plus, we've got articles from Popular Science, CBS News, The Guardian, Manga Bay, and some just stunning expedition footage to go over.
We're covering a lot of unseen territory today.
Yeah.
I mean, we're going from uncharted Caribbean reefs to a literal bone highway in the Indian Ocean.
Yeah, the whale graveyard.
And then we'll get into how our modern tech is confusing the oldest predators on Earth. But let's start in the Caribbean.
Okay, let's do it.
I was looking at the notes on this recent mapping expedition, and the sheer scale of what they explored is just mind-boggling.
The scope is totally unprecedented for that region. So a team of scientists spent 6 weeks surveying the seafloor around UK overseas territories.
Like the Cayman Islands, right?
Right, the Cayman Islands, Turks and Caicos, and Anguilla. And they mapped roughly 10,000 square miles of ocean floor.
Wow.
And they were going down as far as 6,000 meters.
That is incredibly deep. This water's so remote, it hasn't even been mapped by boat before. And according to the sources, they pulled up over 14,000 individual specimens, which, what really threw me off was the variety. Because for a long time, didn't everyone just assume the bottom of the ocean was this barren, freezing desert?
Yeah, that was the running assumption for decades. I mean, there's no sunlight, it's near freezing, and the pressure is so intense it would crush a car.
Right.
So people thought, how could anything thrive there? But this expedition proved that the deep sea is actually teeming with highly specialized life. It's a really dynamic ecosystem.
Okay, let's unpack how specialized we're talking.
Yeah.
Because the footage of these creatures is wild.
Oh, it's incredible.
They found this dragonfish with a glowing rod tucked under its chin to lure in prey, and a pelican eel with a glowing tail.
Yeah, the bioluminescence is everywhere.
And this really bizarre swimming sea cucumber. But the one that really got me was the barrel-eye fish.
Oh, the barrel-eye. I mean, that is a masterclass in deep-sea adaptation.
I'm looking at a picture of it right now, and it has this completely transparent head, like you can see inside it.
Yep.
And its eyes are inside the jelly of its head, and they're pointing straight up. I'm just trying to wrap my mind around how that is an evolutionary advantage.
Well, think about the lighting environment down there. It's almost pitch black, right?
Right.
But there is still this incredibly faint trickle of light filtering down from the surface miles above. So the barrel eye has evolved these tubular eyes that basically act like hypersensitive camera lenses.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and by pointing them directly upward through its transparent skull, it can spot the really faint silhouettes of prey swimming above it.
Ah, so it's looking for shadows against that tiny bit of surface light.
Exactly. It's perfectly adapted to its environment.
That is both terrifying and brilliant.
Yeah.
But the biology wasn't the only surprise, right? Because they also mapped the geography and stumbled across a 300-meter-wide crater.
The blue hole, yeah.
A massive blue hole. And I need to stop you here because I genuinely don't get this. It's like turning on the lights in this massive ancient basement and finding an alien city.
That's a great way to put it.
How is it possible that a 300-meter-wide crater just goes completely unnoticed until right now? Like, don't we have satellites constantly mapping the globe?
We do, but it comes down to the physics of water. Satellites rely on electromagnetic waves like radar and visible light to map the surface.
Okay.
But water is incredibly dense, so it absorbs those waves really quickly. You can't just bounce a radar signal from space to see the bottom of a 6,000-meter trench.
So the satellite literally just sees a flat blue surface.
Exactly. To map the deep ocean, you have to physically send a ship out there and ping sonar arrays all the way down, sweeping the floor row by row.
Which sounds ridiculously tedious.
It is incredibly slow, wildly expensive, and just a logistical nightmare. which is why these deep reefs have remained a secret. And researchers actually think these reefs are so far down they're shielded from climate change.
Oh, that's amazing. It's like finding this pristine, ancient sanctuary shielded from all the chaos on the surface.
It really is. And it highlights a core marine conservation rule, which is you can't protect an environment if you don't even know it's there.
Right. If it's just a blank space on the chart, it's totally vulnerable.
Exactly. So documenting this vibrant neighborhood is the first step for governments to actually step in and establish protections.
Which is such a beautiful, hopeful thought. But as we transition to this next study, the tone shifts drastically.
Yeah, it really does.
Because while that Caribbean neighborhood is built on living coral, we're finding that other massive deep-sea ecosystems are built entirely on death.
Right, which takes us halfway across the globe to the Indian Ocean, specifically the diamantinae zone.
Okay.
A team using the Chinese submersible Fendouzhe just published findings on the deepest, oldest, and most expensive whale graveyard ever discovered on Earth.
The numbers in this study, I had to read them twice. We're talking about a stretch of seafloor that's 745 miles long.
Yep.
And it's just packed with the remains of whales. What are the depths we're looking at here?
They documented 485 specific fossil sites, and the depths range from roughly 13,700 feet to nearly 23,000 feet.
That is so deep.
And these aren't just modern casualties either. Some of these fossils date back 5.3 million years.
To the Pliocene era.
Exactly. They even identified a skull from a completely unknown extinct species of beaked whale. They named it Pterocetus diamantinae.
Finding an extinct species is amazing, but what really gets me is the mechanics of this. Like, what happens when a modern whale dies and joins this graveyard? Because there aren't, vultures swimming around at 20,000 feet.
Right. So this is a phenomenon marine biologists call a whale fall.
Okay.
When a massive marine mammal dies in the open ocean, it eventually loses buoyancy and starts the slow sink to the seabed. On land, a carcass like that would rot pretty fast.
Because of insects and scavengers and weather?
Exactly. But in the deep sea, you have freezing temperatures, high pressure, and very little oxygen. So a single whale carcass doesn't just rot, it transforms into a thriving localized oasis.
So it's essentially a pop-up restaurant for the deep sea that just stays open for centuries.
Pretty much. The succession of life is wild. First, you get the mobile scavengers tearing away the soft tissue.
Sure. But once the skeleton is bare, highly specialized creatures take over. The researchers documented jellyfish, brittle stars, and these remarkable organisms called osedacs.
Wait, I read about these. The bone-boring worms?
Yes, the bone-boring worm.
How do worms bore into solid bone without teeth? That makes no sense.
It's crazy, right?
Yeah.
They secrete an acid that dissolves the hard calcium of the skeleton, and then symbiotic bacteria inside the worms digest the rich lipids and fats trapped deep inside the bone matrix.
Oh, wow. So they're eating the fat from the inside out.
Exactly. An entire food web builds itself on the slow breakdown of that bone fat.
That is unbelievable. And because of the underwater geography there, it's this V-shaped trench, right?
Yeah, the diamantinae zone naturally funnels sinking objects together.
Right. So researchers estimate there could be up to 10 million whale carcasses scattered across this zone.
Which brings up a massive ecological point,
Oh.
carbon sequestration. A large whale accumulates a vast amount of carbon over its lifetime.
Oh, I didn't even think about that. Yeah, so when millions of them sink into this trench, they trap that carbon at the bottom of the ocean. We're talking about roughly 6.7 million tons of biological carbon securely locked away.
That is a massive carbon sink. But beyond the carbon, you have 10 million carcasses forming a 745-mile line. What does that do to the local deep-sea biology?
What's fascinating here is how this completely rewrites our view of deep-sea migration.
How so?
Well, we used to think deep-sea communities, like the ones around hydrothermal vents, were isolated, like these little islands of life cut off from each other.
Right.
But this massive stretch of whale falls acts as a series of evolutionary stepping stones. They're evolutionary hotspots.
Ah, so it connects them.
Yes, it provides a continuous, nutritious highway that allows deep-sea species to migrate and evolve across these vast, empty stretches of the ocean floor.
It's incredible to think that whales have been navigating the surface for millions of years, totally unaware that their own skeletons are paving a highway for creatures miles beneath them.
It really is a perfect, ancient system.
But of course, today, marine life is encountering a very modern, totally invisible obstacle down there.
Right. Which brings us to the North Sea and this fascinating Dutch project called Elasmo Power.
Yes, so the sources here explore how offshore wind farms, which, we need for green energy, might actually be confusing sharks and rays.
To understand the conflict, we have to look at how these animals, elasmobranchs, actually sense the world. They have a sensory superpower that humans just don't possess.
It's all in their snouts, right? I read about these tiny, jelly-filled canals.
The ampullae of Lorenzini.
Right. Which, by the way, sounds like an expensive Italian dessert, but it's actually this ultra-sensitive biological radar.
It really is. It allows them to detect incredibly faint electric fields in the water. Just to give you an idea of how sensitive it is, a shark can sense the tiny, muscular, electrical impulse of a crab's heartbeat buried under the sand.
That is terrifyingly precise.
And they also use it to tap into the natural magnetic field of the Earth for global navigation.
Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting. We have these ancient predators relying on microscopic electrical signals. And then humans come along and lay thousands of miles of high-voltage subsea cables for these wind turbines.
Yep.
And these cables emit electromagnetic fields, or EMFs. It seems like we're basically putting a giant magnet right next to a hiker's compass, but like attaching it to a shark's nose.
That is exactly the core concern the Dutch scientists wanted to test. So they set up these controlled lab experiments to see how the EMFs from power cables actually impact their behavior.
And the most startling results were from the babies, right?
Yeah.
The baby thornback rays.
Yeah, the embryos. They tested them while they were still developing inside their tough, leathery egg cases.
The ones people find on the beach and call mermaids' purses.
Exactly. So in a natural environment, when an embryo in an egg case senses the electric field of a predator nearby, it has an evolutionary freeze response.
It just plays dead.
Right. It completely stops wiggling, so the predator swims right past without noticing it.
But when the scientists exposed these embryos to the EMFs from alternating current, or AC power cables, the babies didn't freeze. They actually became hyperactive.
Which is a huge problem.
Now, I have a dumb question here, because I was struggling to understand the actual danger in the wild.
Yeah.
If the baby ray is trapped inside a tough egg case anyway, why does it matter if it thrashes around? Doesn't the predator just eat the egg regardless?
You'd think so, but ocean predators aren't really hunting by sight, especially at the bottom. They hunt by electrical signal and movement.
Ah, okay.
The egg case itself gives some camouflage, but if the embryo inside starts thrashing around, it drastically amplifies its electrical and kinetic signature.
Oh, so it's effectively ringing a dinner bell.
Exactly. The EMF from the cable is completely overriding their core survival instinct, which, in the wild, gets them eaten.
Wow. Okay, so this invisible cable is getting babies eaten, and it affects the adults too, doesn't it? The adult cat sharks had a totally different reaction.
Yeah, the adult small-spotted cat sharks they tested were exposed to direct current, or DC, cables, and they became lethargic. They showed reduced activity.
So they just sort of shut down.
Basically. And if a shark stops to rest or gets disoriented every single time it crosses one of these cables, it's losing crucial time and energy it needs for hunting or mating.
It's just a glaring example of how our best intentions, like building wind farms to fight climate change, have these really complex, unintended downstream effects.
It is complex, but if we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to remember that wind farms aren't all bad for marine life. In fact, the same study revealed a massive paradox.
Right, because of the eDNA testing.
Exactly. The researchers conducted environmental DNA, or eDNA, testing in the waters right around operational wind farms in the North Sea.
And eDNA is fascinating. For anyone who doesn't know, you're basically scooping up a cup of seawater and analyzing the genetic breadcrumbs like shed skin cells or mucus to see exactly what animals have been swimming there recently.
Right. And what they found in the water right around the turbines was DNA from 5 different species of sharks and rays.
Including the starry smoothhound and the basking shark, which is massive.
Yeah.
But why are they congregating around the exact things emitting the confusing EMFs?
Because offshore wind farms inadvertently act as de facto marine refuges.
Oh, because of the fishing bans?
Precisely.
Yeah.
Commercial fishing vessels that use destructive bottom trawling gear are strictly banned from operating near the turbines.
Because snagging a net on a multi-million-dollar power cable would be a disaster.
Exactly. So we've accidentally created these highly protected safe havens where the seabed can actually regenerate.
That is a wild trade-off. We're throwing invisible sensory noise at them, but we're shielding them from physical nets.
It really highlights the hierarchy of threats out there. The EMFs are a nuanced challenge that engineers are trying to mitigate, maybe by burying the cables deeper.
Right.
But the physical threat from human fishing is blunt, it's immediate, and it is devastating.
Which is actually the perfect bridge into arguably the most urgent part of our deep dive today. We need to talk about the Bycatch 22 report.
Yeah, this is a tough one.
It was published by the Wildlife and Countryside Link, and it exposes the hidden collateral damage of commercial fishing in UK waters. And the numbers. They're just grim. What are we actually looking at annually?
So bycatch is the industry term for non-target animals that are accidentally captured and killed in commercial fishing gear.
Okay.
In UK waters alone, the report estimates that commercial fleets accidentally kill over 10,000 seabirds and over 1,000 cetaceans, so dolphins, porpoises, and minke whales,
Wow.
plus around 500 seals, 120 tons of protected sharks and rays, and over 1,000 endangered Atlantic salmon.
Which often gets swept up by boats
Yeah.
hunting for mackerel, right?
Exactly.
Every one of those numbers is a living creature experiencing immense panic. And the report anchors all this data with this really heartbreaking story about a female gray seal in Cornwall named Legs.
Yeah, her story is awful.
For 7 years, she survived with a single loop of monofilament fishing net tangled tightly around her neck. And the net cut so deeply into her flesh over the years that her skin actually grew over it.
It's horrific.
It caused chronic swelling, and she had violent neurological spasms triggered by constant pain. And she's not an anomaly.
No, she's not. The fishing gear driving the static nets that just hang invisibly in the water column, it doesn't discriminate. If an animal is too big to swim through the mesh, it drowns or it sustains these horrific injuries.
But wait, I'm a little confused about the source of this data. Because I know that in 2021, the UK passed a law making it mandatory for fishers to report any marine mammal they accidentally catch.
Right, they did.
So if it's the law, why do we need independent conservation groups publishing these estimates?
Because the self-reporting system is a catastrophic failure. Since that mandatory reporting law was implemented, out of the thousands of mammals dying every single year, fishers across the entire UK fleet have officially reported a total of 9 marine mammals.
9.
9.
So the industry is just refusing to admit the problem exists.
Yeah.
How do you even fix a problem nobody wants to report without completely shutting down the commercial fleets, I mean?
Well, the authors of the Bycatch 22 report argue you don't have to shut down the fleets. The solution is twofold. First, you shift from trust-based self-reporting to remote electronic monitoring, or RM.
Which means installing cameras and sensors on the vessels, right?
Exactly, to provide unbiased data.
Okay, but once you have the cameras, how do you actually stop the animals from dying? You're just recording it.
Because we already have proven gear modifications that work beautifully. The report highlights this amazing case study in Filey Bay up in Yorkshire.
Oh, the seabirds?
Right. They had a devastating problem with seabird bycatch. Around 700 birds were drowning in nets every year. But conservationists convinced the fishers to simply swap their standard nets for heavier nets.
Explain the physics of that to me. Like, how does a heavier net save a bird?
It's all about the sink rate. A heavy net drops to the ocean floor much faster, which means it spends significantly less time drifting through the upper water column where diving birds, like razorbills, are actively hunting.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
And just by making that one simple switch, the seabird death toll in Filey Bay plummeted from 700 a year down to just 4 or 5.
Wait, really? Down to 4 or 5? That is an incredible turnaround.
It really is, and we're seeing it in Scotland too. Creel fishers dropping pots for crab are successfully trialing weighted ropes.
Instead of the floating ropes that catch whales.
Exactly. Instead of the rope forming a flowing loop in the water that catches a migrating whale's fin, the weighted rope just lies flat and safe on the seabed. It totally proves that commercial fishing and wildlife conservation can coexist.
But it requires the political will to actually mandate the cameras and the new gear.
Mm-hmm.
And, the report makes a point to connect this directly back to you, the listener.
Yeah, this is a crucial point.
Because roughly 90% of the seafood consumed in the UK is imported. Every time you buy a piece of fish, you are casting a vote in a global supply chain.
Right. The UK can set a high standard at home, but they also have the power to demand that imported seafood meets those exact same wildlife protections.
The choices made at a local supermarket literally dictate the survival of vulnerable species thousands of miles out at sea.
Absolutely. Global accountability is the only way this works.
Well, we have covered so much ground today. I mean, we traveled from the pristine, uncharted depths of a Caribbean blue hole all the way to a 5.3 million-year-old whale graveyard in the Indian Ocean.
A literal highway for life.
Right. We looked at how invisible electromagnetic fields from wind farms are scrambling the survival instincts of baby sharks, and we confronted the blunt reality of fishing bycatch and the incredibly simple gear tweaks that can actually solve it.
It paints a very vivid picture of our ocean. It's infinitely complex, highly adaptable, but intensely vulnerable to human activity.
Which brings us to the end of today's deep dive into these sources. But before we sign off, we want to leave you with one final thought to mull over on your own.
Yeah, so we spent a lot of time today talking about the power of modern technology, right? We can use eDNA to detect a single shark hiding in a wind farm. We can send robotic submarines down to map a 5.3 million-year-old bone in the pitch black.
Yeah.
But even with all that, we have still only mapped a tiny fraction of the deep ocean floor. So the question is, what happens when we finally do map the remaining 90%? Are we going to discover entirely new alien ecosystems? Or might we find that our invisible human impacts, like deep water microplastics and chemical runoff, have already fundamentally altered those ecosystems before we even have the chance to name them?
Oh, man. It's like turning on the lights in a sealed ancient room, only to find our own fingerprints are already all over the wall.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Stay curious, keep asking the big questions. I'll catch you next time.